Thank you for joining us today on the Alaska Weather TV show. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. It's June 29th, 2023. You can reach us at 1-855-937-4977, online weather.gov/Alaska, and email us at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We love to hear from you, so please reach out. Let's take a look at our rainfall totals from yesterday. Anyone in South Central noticed it was a fairly rainy day, but Anchorage actually broke a daily record of 0.51 inches of rainfall, ending at 10:30 last night. So again, if you were thinking it was a rainy day yesterday, you were definitely correct. Across the Kenai, we had a lot of rainfall, and up north into the Mat-Su Valley as well. Here, hot off the press, we have the fire weather update from the Alaska Interagency Coordination Center. So here's their latest update. So there's going to be warmer weather this weekend, which we're going to dive into in a bit, but that will bring some drying. Those showers and thunderstorms will also dampen fuels as well. And remember, despite the rain, fine fuels will dry quickly, so still be vigilant with your fireworks this weekend and into next week. Low to moderate fire activity is expected through July. And here's an update on the fires in Canada. Canada is having an unprecedented fire weather season. And for information, search CWFIS to get official wildland fire data and forecasts. So again, if you're going to be traveling in Canada, you can get the latest updates and safety information. Again, search CWFIS to get official wildland fire data and forecasts from Canada. Let's look at our hazard weather across the state. As you can tell, it's another calm day across much of the area. We don't have any advisories, watches, or warnings. So that's great news today. Let's look at your fire danger. As we just discussed, across much of the region, we're just looking at low fire weather data, and only a few portions of the state along the North Arctic coast are even experiencing high risk in some of those grassy areas. So again, much different picture this year than last year in terms of how fire dangerous those fuels are. Let's take a look at your latest satellite imagery. You can see we have multiple lows, none of them particularly strong, but we have a low spinning south of Kodiak. We have one near in the Bering, and we have several weak troughs across in the interior Alaska, which is supporting a lot of that widespread cloudiness and showers across much of the region. So again, here's today's weather map. As I was saying, multiple weak troughs in the interior, supporting nothing too organized, but enough to support weak, especially afternoon shower activity. Then we have our 1003 millibar low located in the Bering. We also have a 1005 millibar low south of Kodiak Island. We do have some high pressure trying to sneak into the western portion of the Bering near the Kamchatka Peninsula. For tonight's weather, again, those lows aren't going to be moving that fast. We have that weak low again is drifting near Kodiak Island. We have that other low over the central Aleutians slowly drifting to the south, but again, very weak. We do have widespread fog expected tonight across much of the North Arctic coast, and a little bit of those troughs still in the region, although they're going to be weakening overnight. As we go into Friday, again, this low continues to drift southeast towards the central Aleutian Islands. We do have a little bit of a local ridge building across the Gulf of Alaska, but there's so much moisture around, we're still going to be seeing some showers along the coast. We do have a low just north of the Kamchatka Peninsula on the western part of the Bering Sea, and that weak trough is going to be supporting some showers into portions of the central Alaska. Saturday is going to be by far the driest day across much of mainland Alaska, with a ridge of high pressure settling into the area. We do have a 986 millibar low, much more potent than other ones that we are experiencing previously, as well as a front across the region. So that's going to be causing some gusty winds, moderate rains across portions of Kodiak Island on your Saturday, as well as across the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian Islands. Let's look at your low temperatures. Again, for Friday, we're expecting across the Panhandle temperatures in the upper 40s to lower 50s. Similar temperatures across much of the region, although 43 near Gulkana. As we go into your Friday afternoon, we're going to be warming to about 62 in Anchorage. We're also going to be hitting 66 near Gulkana. In the Panhandle, temperatures will be a little cooler in the upper 50s as that trough kind of sits in that region. As we go into your Saturday morning, again, temperatures in the, 50s to lower to mid 40s across the Kenai Peninsula. And also, as we go into the Panhandle, upper 40s to 50. For your Saturday afternoon, we are warming to 70 in Gulkana, 65 in the Anchorage area. So again, with that drier weather, a little warmer temperatures in the region. Meanwhile, with that moisture hanging around the Panhandle, temperatures will stay more in the upper 50s to near 60. For your Friday morning along the Arctic coast, we're going to be looking at temperatures in the mid-30s with some of that stratus and fog. In the Seward Peninsula, again, we're going to be looking at upper 30s. And in interior areas, up to 55. Friday afternoon, we're warming up to the mid-70s and close to 70 near Fairbanks. So again, a warm day in the interior. We also are going to be warming into the upper 50s along even close to the Arctic coast. So, but in those areas just along the coast, we're going to be seeing temperatures more of that in marine environment, about 50. For your Saturday morning, again, we're going to be looking at temperatures in the mid-30s along the Arctic coast, upper 30s to mid-40s in the Seward Peninsula, and in the interior, lower or upper 40s to mid-50s. Saturday afternoon, again, widespread dry conditions. So you can see those 70s spread across much of the state, even a 60s into the Seward Peninsula. So nice, warmer, drier weather for your Saturday afternoon across much of the interior, with temperatures again in the upper 40s to lower 50s across the Arctic coast. Looking at your Friday morning, again, we're having those lows in the area, so we're looking at along the Alaska Peninsula temperatures in the mid-40s. By your Friday afternoon, we're warming up to 65 in Bethel, so a nice Friday afternoon despite some of the wetter conditions. For Saturday morning, temperatures are going to be in the mid-40s across much of Alaska Peninsula and across much of Bristol Bay area and into the eastern Aleutians. By Saturday afternoon, again, drier conditions by that point. So we're looking almost up to the 70 for the Bethel area. And even in Bristol Bay areas, we're looking at mid-60s. So some nice weather for you on Saturday. Let's take a look at your CPC outlook. Again, this is for July 5th through 9th. Again, we're seeing cold temperatures staying entrenched across much of the central part of the state. The only part of the state really looking at potential to have slightly above normal temperatures is, again, near Ukqiavik and the Arctic Village. But for the majority of Alaska, we are going to be looking at cooler temperatures remaining entrenched. We're also looking at possibility in the Panhandle. We might get slightly above average as well in July 5th through July 9th. As we look at precipitation, actually drier than average across the Panhandle areas, and but most of the rest of the state, we are looking at average to above average rainfall.
Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. If you haven't already heard the last TV broadcast of Alaska weather, at least in the traditional sense, over the airwaves, will be on Friday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. We will be moving on YouTube from the Alaska Public Media site to @NWS AKwx Alaska, so you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel ahead of time. A public comment period remains open through July 30th, so please send your comments and concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. If you have any additional questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. We thank you for your patience and understanding.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us for the aviation portion of this broadcast. First, we're going to be covering visibility and ceiling levels across the state. As a quick reminder, IFR is Instrument Flight Rules, and that's denoted by the red color. And that basically means that it's more challenging for pilots to fly because of lower visibility and lower ceilings. So pilots should be cautious in those areas when their flight plans today. So you can see across much of the Bering, we are expecting low visibilities for your Friday morning. That's due to multiple low pressure systems in the area. We also along the North Arctic coast are expecting lower visibilities and lower ceilings due to a high pressure in place that's going to be supporting widespread fog and stratus. As we go further east into the Panhandle, we're also have concerns about a dissipating front that's going to be lingering there in a weak system, but it's going to be strong enough to keep low ceilings and low visibilities for that area. For your Friday afternoon, we're going to be seeing much of the same. Again, pretty good conditions if you're going to be going along the coast, but you might encounter periodic MVFR conditions. Somewhat up north, the fog will periodically mix out, so be aware of stratus up there, but it'll generally be better by the afternoon hours. And again, we're expecting some mixing out across much of the Panhandle as well for your Friday afternoon. For your Saturday morning, again, socked in across much of the Bering. Some of that stratus is going to be pushing on shore up north, and again, we're going to have some weak low-pressure systems in the Bering Sea. But again, fairly good conditions, but also MVFR and coast and along some of the mountains in South Central. Saturday afternoon, again, conditions are going to improve with that diurnal mixing and sea breezes along the coast, but still be a little cautious along the Seward Peninsula. You might run into some MVFR conditions. Again, widespread IFR conditions across much of the Bering Sea. Let's take a look at your past conditions. For Aniktivik Pass, we're expecting MVFR conditions for Friday. Same for Adigan Pass, MVFR conditions throughout your whole entire Friday. Lake Clark, we're going to start out with IFR conditions and improve to MVFR for the afternoon hours, and that's the same for Merrill Pass. For Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions are expected throughout much of your day. For Windy Pass, we're expecting IFR conditions, which will improve by MVFR conditions by the afternoon. Isabel Pass will start out with MVFR conditions, improving to VFR conditions by your afternoon hours. Following from Antasta Pass, we're expecting MVFR conditions that will improve by VFR for your Friday afternoon. For Tahina Pass, we'll start out as IFR conditions and improve to MVFR by your afternoon hours. Portage Pass will remain in MVFR conditions for all of your Friday with some of that lingering coastal stratus. Same thing for Chilkoot and White Passes. They're going to be seeing that stratus we talked about in the Panhandle. Let's take a look at your freezing levels for your Friday morning. As you can see, we have our ridge entrenched across the interior. So we're looking at freezing levels about 10,000 feet into the North Coast, and with 8,000 feet. Again, you have to go to get those cooler temperatures. You have to go out into the Bering where those low pressure systems are lowered at about 6,000 feet across much of Gulf of Alaska. So looking for your icing conditions, again, we're mostly concerned with that low pressure system. We have some areas of considerable moderate across the central eastern Aleutian Islands and across the Alaska Peninsula, and isolated moderate around that. Again, we're expecting a few afternoon showers. We do have some areas of isolated moderate in some of your interior areas and along the eastern border of Alaska. And again, above 10,000 feet, we're expecting isolated moderate in parts of the Panhandle as well due to to that dissipating system. Let's take a look at your jet stream. We have, again, like I was saying, multiple low-pressure systems. Our greatest jet is sitting right across the central and western Aleutians, up to 115 knots. So, again, fairly decent jet for this time of year. The other jet is 95 knots associated with this low-pressure system near Juneau we talked about. And we have rich high pressure sitting up along the North Arctic coast. As we go lower in elevation, 9,000 feet, again, we have that low. The jet is much weaker. We only have about 35 knots at 9,000 feet. Similar story for our low near Juneau. It's about 40 knots, a little stronger at the surface there. Finally, when we get down to 3,000 feet, we have a jet still at about 40 knots across the western and central Aleutians, and basically about 20 knots at 3,000 feet near that Juneau low. Finally, let's take a look at your turbulence risk. Again, it's mostly associated with that low pressure system, considerable, moderate out on the western Aleutian and central Aleutian Islands.
Hi, star signs. I'm Trace. Most people know there are 12 zodiac signs. I'm a Taurus Gemini cusp, clearly. But what if I told you the sun passes through 13 signs? Wow. Hit the darkness at 10 p.m. facing south to find Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Find orange Antares and Scorpius as well. Ophis' knee stars are Sabic and Zeta Ophiochi right next door. Ophis' brightest star, though, is his head, Razelhage. To find it, draw a line from Antares to Vega. Roz is about halfway between. Ophi is wrestling Serpens the Serpent, which is two constellations, the head and the tail. To find the head, make a triangle with Razelhage, Arcturus, and Antares. Smack dab in the middle is Unukalai, the serpent's neck. Due to Earth's wobbling axis, the skies are constantly shifting. So today, the sun passes through Ophiuchus in December, but astrologers use the old calendar. So I'm not going to wrestle that snake. So keep looking up.
The Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge is a refuge in Alaska. It's the third largest refuge in the National Wildlife Refuge system. North of Fairbanks, it's a vast ecosystem of wetlands. What drives this refuge are natural forces of fire, ice, and water.
The Yukon Flats has got a really interesting history. Back in the late 50s, early 1960s, there was a proposal to dam the Yukon River down by Rampart, which is downstream of the Yukon Flats. And it was a hydroelectric proposal. And so in order to assess the merits of that proposal, people got together because they were a little bit concerned about what the impacts might be on the Yukon Flats, the habitat, and all the people living within the Yukon Flats Refuge. There's quite a few people living within the refuge. We have 7 villages. So in order to figure out how special the Yukon Flats was, the Fish and Wildlife Service banded over 40,000 ducks within the Yukon Flats. And using the band return information, they found out that those ducks were using 45 of the 50 lower 48 states. They were using 7 foreign countries, and they were using most of the provinces over in Canada, as well as all the major flyways down in the lower 48. And so that identified that the Yukon Flats was a special breeding area, and that information, along with a lot of other public information that was gathered during that whole process, really ensured that the dam never did go in, and thus the habitat was preserved.
So what that did is it really highlighted the national importance of this area and how important conserving this particular area is for conserving many other natural areas in the lower 48 and even across the continent.
To protect the Yukon Flats Refuge because we have responsibility towards our future generations to leave land protected in the state that it is now. The Yukon Flats is a wild place. The ecosystem is intact and functioning, and you can't find that very many places in the rest of the U.S.
The Yukon Flats Refuge is among the most important places for ducks. So each spring, millions of ducks, and in addition to shorebirds and geese, raptors and loons, they all fly to the refuge to nest and rear their young. And the reason they are attracted to this area is because it has really enriched wetlands. There are lots of nutrients in the wetlands that provide a lot of food for the growing young.
We also have a lot of predator, prey species like bears and black bears, grizzly bears, wolves. We also have a lot of moose and fur bearers that use the refuge. So overall, there's just a great diversity of both upland, lowland, and migratory bird species that use the refuge.
Most people know the flats as a duck nursery, and that was one of the main purposes that was designed for, but a lot of recent research over the last decade has really illustrated how important it is to a variety of native endemic fish species for subsistence and recreational and commercial fisheries throughout the entire Yukon River Basin and out to supporting commercial fisheries out to the Bering Sea as well. So it supports a variety of different whitefish and salmon species, the northern pike, a little bit of everything that people rely on as cultural identities, but also for subsistence resources and where people go to recreate and enjoy being outside.
The type of recreation that you're going to find on Yukon Flats Refuge is very primitive. And what that often does is it gives people a complete break from some of the stresses of today's world. There are no cell phone towers out there. There are no roads. There are no trails. So any type of recreation that people have is entirely natural. The lands and waters within the Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge are open to the public to enjoy. And that's a really important tenet upon which the United States is built.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the marine portion of today's broadcast. First, we're going to take a look at our sea ice conditions. As you can see, we still have a little bit of sea ice hanging on near Nome, but mostly ice-free waters. We also have some ice hanging on near Kotzebue as well. But as you go up to the Chukchi Sea, we're slowly losing some of that sea ice as well. Also starting to open up near Utqiagvik, as well as near Kaktovik. So summer is in full swing. As you can see, in 5 days, we continue to see that sea ice erode. It looks like Nome will be totally in ice-free conditions within 5 days, and ice will be reduced a bit near Kotzebue as well. Let's take a look at your important weekend marine forecast. Again, near Juneau, we are expecting along the coast winds generally around 15 knots from the south, waves up to about 5 feet. In interior areas, we're expecting waves could be up to 3 feet near Ketchikan, but winds generally 10 knots. Again, be a little cautious near channeled areas. Waves and winds could be a little bit higher. As we go into Saturday, a weak low approaches the system. So we see winds increase slightly in some areas and waves, more so the waves. We have waves up to about 5 feet. In interior areas, we're seeing winds up to, and waves up to 2 feet. So basically similar conditions throughout much of the weekend. Friday for across south central along the North Gulf of Alaska coast. Again, ubiquitous winds of about 10 knots, a little bit higher south of Homer. Again, waves generally about 3 feet in Cook Inlet. Then as you go into Prince William Sound, we're looking at waves of about 2 feet. As we go into your Saturday, we're expecting similar conditions generally. We're looking at, again, waves 2 to 3 feet across Cook Inlet. And even as you go into outside waters, waves of about 3 feet. Let's look at your Alaska Peninsula forecast. On Friday, generally waves 2 to 3 feet in Bristol Bay with general 20-knot wind. Off of Kodiak, you're looking at a 15-knot wind and 4-foot waves, and similar conditions along the Alaska Peninsula. Saturday, the story changes. That's when we have that strong low-pressure system moving into that area. It's going to be causing some fairly dramatic changes in waves and winds. So be careful if you're going out to the Alaska Peninsula on Saturday. You're going to have a dramatic change from Friday. So near Kodiak on Saturday, we're looking at about 25-knot winds, waves 5 feet. And then near Sand Point and Falls Pass, we're looking at 40-knot winds, waves up to about 10 feet. Even in sheltered areas of Bristol Bay, we're looking at up to 8-foot waves, winds up to 30 knots. Let's look at your Friday as we go towards the west. Across the Aleutian Islands, we're looking at winds generally 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet. As we move into your Saturday, again, it mostly is going to be impacting eastern portions of the Aleutian Islands. But again, south of Unalaska, we're looking at 12-foot waves, 35 knots in the gale territory for the eastern Aleutian Islands. And slowly petering off as you go towards the central Aleutian Islands, we're looking at just waves of 5 to 6 feet, winds of about 25 knots. Now let's look at your forecast as you go into Bristol Bay and up near Hooper Bay. For Friday, we're looking, again, it's going to be fairly sheltered, I guess up to 3 feet near the Pribilof Islands, but generally 1 to 3 feet across much of the area, and winds 5 to 15 knots. As we move into Saturday, again, be careful if you're going into southern portions of Bristol Bay. Again, near the Pribilofs, we could be expecting up to 6-foot waves and 25 knots. But generally, as you go north, it's going to be far enough away from that low that we're still going to be looking at 2 to 3-foot waves and 10 to 15 knots. As you move up to our Arctic coast, out in our ice areas, winds 5 to 10 knots, fairly calm. As you go through the Bering Strait, we're looking at waves of about 4 feet, winds up to 20 knots. Similar conditions on Saturday, again, about 20-knot wind, 4-foot waves, and in ice-free waters, waves up to 2 feet. So let's revisit where these low-pressure systems are coming again. So here's Friday with that weaker low. Again, we have that ridge of pressure occurring along the Gulf of Alaska coast. By Saturday, this much more impressive low hits southern portions of the Bering, western portions of Bristol Bay, and across the Aleutians and into the Alaska Peninsula, and even pushing waves up a little more near Kodiak as well. So travel with caution if you're going to be going in those areas this weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.